Bonjour à tous, vous avez vu, il fait très très beau, nous avons eu 10 heures de voyage, une longue aventure, mais quel plaisir ce matin de se retrouver avec Anne, avec Jeff Richard, qui est donc le directeur créatif à Chaosium, la personne derrière Runequest, derrière l'appel de Cthulhu, est ici. First thing first, hello and welcome to France.
Bonjour. This is fantastic. Yesterday I got out of gray and cold Berlin, hopped on a plane, and here I am in sunny Cannes.
À peu près comme likewise. Donc hier, il était à Berlin, parce qu'il habite à Berlin, et il s'est retrouvé aujourd'hui à Cannes. So Jeff, we have a lot of questions, okay? Let's be honest. The first one will be that in the last few years, we've seen a new momentum concerning Chaosium. And what do you think can be accounted for in this new era for the company?
Well, I'd say that when Greg and Sandy came back, and we call it informally within the company, it was Greg and Sandy put the band back together. And since then, it's been very much the Chaosium that Greg always wanted Chaosium to be. So we're both a business, but we're also very much a group of artists trying to create very high quality art. And I think that's been what's been the drive of this resurgence.
Alors depuis qu'en fait il y a eu ce retour que Greg Stafford et Sandy Peterson se sont retrouvés ensemble et qui ont recréé le groupe en quelque sorte, c'est la même émotion qu'il y avait dans l'ancien Chaosium, et c'est aussi à la fois certes du travail, mais c'est aussi cet esprit de famille qui règne entre eux. So let's talk first about Call of Cthulhu. Very popular game in France. And how do you explain this ongoing success in 35 years? Why is it still the game we want to play?
Well, I think Call of Cthulhu is, in many ways, it deconstructs the assumptions in standard role-playing games. So your Call of Cthulhu character doesn't get better with time. Your Call of Cthulhu character gets worse with time. Your Call of Cthulhu character is not necessarily going to go insane or die, but that is usually the likely outcome for many, if not most, investigators. And as a result, it is more focused around the role-playing and around the investigation than you normally have in role-playing games. And I think that for a lot of people playing role-playing games, they want more than just simply going into a dungeon, knocking down a door, killing the monster, and taking its stuff. And the other thing about it is, I think the mythos speaks very much to a lot of the anxieties of our own time. And I think it's hit a chord in some of the fears of postmodern life. So.
But you said the word dungeon. Alors là, je n'ai oublié de traduire la question. Donc c'était pourquoi est-ce qu'il y a un tel succès pour Donjons et Dragons depuis toutes ces années. Et Jeff nous disait donc que c'est tout d'abord le personnage, parce que le personnage ne va pas aller en s'améliorant, il ne va pas devenir meilleur avec le temps. Au contraire, il va juste empirer avec le temps, mourir, devenir fou. On a tous connu ça. Et puis également, ça donc aide à l'interprétation. Ce n'est pas que lancer les dés ou explorer le donjon. Et puis aussi, dernièrement, c'est que, en dernier point, c'est que c'est quelque chose qui est très en écho avec notre temps et les peurs qu'on peut ressentir. So, very basic and broad question, what are the plans for Call of Cthulhu line? Quels sont les projets pour la ligne l'appel de Cthulhu?
Well, our biggest release for this year that we're working on is the Malleus Monstrosum, which is the bestiary of the gods and monsters of the Cthulhu mythos. And it's illustrated. It is gorgeous. It is one of the things we try to do in Chaosium is to keep pushing up the artistic level of our books, and this is going to be a hard one for us to beat, although we have another project we're going to try to beat it with. But we have that, and we're also, I've got Mike Mason working on the new Gaslight, so returning that. And then our other big focus is putting together what we've been internally calling Miskatonic Country, So that is a return to the classic settings of Arkham, Miskatonic University, Innsmouth, Dunwich, Kingston, updating those books, expanding on them, and building them as a setting within the Call of Cthulhu universe.
Oh, so you went ahead my next question, thank you. Donc, alors beaucoup de projets. Donc, il va y avoir donc le Malleus Monstrorum que l'on a déjà vu en français notamment, avec Loïc Musy évidemment à l'illustration, qui permettra de découvrir eh bien tous les monstres, les petits monstres sympas qui vont vous courir après. Et puis également donc il y a d'autres plans, un nouveau Gaslight. Donc c'est le Londres by Gaslight, London by Gaslight, donc 1890, la période victorienne. Et puis il y aura également, on va retourner sur, vous savez, les contes de la vallée de Miskatonic, Keith Herbert qui avait fait ça notamment, et qui, on va reprendre Dunwich, Arkham, tous les autres, donc cette fois ce sera la vallée miskatonique, et ce qui va me permettre donc d'étendre cela. I have another question also. Chaosium and Call of Cthulhu has been famous for these wide-scale campaigns, such as The Mask, Orient Express. Do you plan on going back on that and release another new massive campaign?
We have Children of Fear actually coming out either late this year or early next year. This is by Lynn Hardy. It's a massive campaign that goes from Shanghai into Central Asia and in South Asia. So again, and there we're playing around with Shangri-La, Agartha, both the Theosophists take on mythology, and on playing around with how to insert the mythos into this. But it's another big world, I mean, not quite world spanning, but it's most of Asia.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, what we want to do is every year or two come out with our own new contribution to what will in 10 years or 20 years be considered the classic canon of Chaosium. The first one I would say though is the Berlin book that we just came out with.
Fantastic one.
It's not a very big book, but it's a very meaty campaign.
Yes, some big bad guys. Donc oui, il y a bien entendu une campagne qui va être créée tous les 2 ans. Il souhaiterait de faire justement amener la propre contribution à Chaosium. Et donc vous avez Lynn Hardy qui va faire cette nouvelle campagne qui se passera en Asie. Can you give me the name of the campaign again? The one
Children of Fear.
Children of Fear, et qui sera justement, on va se promener, pas dans le monde entier, mais en tout cas, on ira Shangri-La, on ira vers l'Orient inconnu et mystérieux. We also have seen that there were some new settings, such as Berlin, down darker trails, which seem to stray away from the America in the 1920s.
The New England.
Yes, and the New England of 1920. So is it a trend, or is it something you want to explore new territories?
Yes, we very much. I mean, one of the things that's a delight about Call of Cthulhu is Call of Cthulhu can be placed in multiple different settings. So one setting is the classic Miskatonic area of Arkham, Innsmouth, and in that there we try to have consistency between the campaigns, the scenarios, the locations, etc. But we can also have, let's run around with putting the mythos into Weimar era Berlin. One of the ones that I desperately want to do is to play around with the Los Angeles of the 1920s. This period when LA just began to form itself, and so you have this pre-existing Mexican and Spanish mythology intersecting with what's coming in from the rest of the United States. All sorts of these sorts of opportunities in different settings are things that we want to play around with. It's a big sandbox.
Yes. Donc oui, évidemment, ils veulent, alors, encore une fois, je n'ai pas traduit la question, est-ce que vous voulez toujours rester dans l'univers des années 20, la Nouvelle-Angleterre des années 20? Bien sûr que non, parce que le mythe peut se transposer vraiment partout. Et par exemple, Jeff disait il aimerait faire un setting qui se passerait dans le Los Angeles des années 20 avec toute l'influence hispanique que l'on pourrait trouver. Effectivement, ce serait là une très grande idée. So my last question about Call of Cthulhu would be Nyarlathotep, Hastur, Shub-Niggurath, un enfer à prononcer en anglais, has been regular antagonists.
Yes.
So do you have any plans for major campaigns or other scenarios where they are not the antagonists? No spoilers if you want to. Donc bien entendu, je disais que Nyarlathotep, Hastur, toujours difficile à traduire en anglais, à prononcer en anglais, c'était des antagonistes qu'on retrouvait très souvent dans les chroniques de l'appel de Cthulhu. Est-ce qu'il y a justement des projets où ce serait d'autres adversaires que l'on pourrait rencontrer?
Well, one hint of the approach that we're wanting to take on that is in the Berlin book, where without giving out any spoilers, there are none of the old faces showing up in that. I mean, one of the books that one of the figures from the Cthulhu mythos that I really do want to build a book around is, of course, Great Cthulhu himself, who's been, frankly, for a game called Call of Cthulhu, he's certainly gotten the short end of the stick a lot. But yeah, I don't want us to be constantly going to the same archetype and the same familiar stock villains. It's one of the things that made me so excited with David Larkin's treatment on Berlin is that I ran that for my players who were experienced Cthulhu players, and they had no idea what they were dealing with. And that's exciting and fun.
Donc, comme le disait Jeff, ils veulent s'éloigner de cette ambiance avec les ennemis que l'on connaît déjà. Et effectivement, donc dans le Berlin by Night, excellent supplément, on en reparlera, mais excellent supplément. Eh bien, l'adversaire et les adversaires ne sont pas du tout ceux qu'on connaît, ce qui déstabilise énormément les joueurs. Et il aimerait bien, et c'est vrai que c'est une chose pour un jeu qui s'appelle l'Appel de Cthulhu, on peut quand même dire que notre brave ami Cthulhu, si on le voit souvent en peluche, en dehors des scénarios, n'est pas très présent. Et donc ça serait développer quelque chose qui serait là-dessus. So now let's talk about another little game called Runequest. Okay, so it's a rebirth, really. We can say that it's a full rebirth. And I have a question because, of course, with the new release and the passing of Greg Stafford, there's a new dimension to this game, I think. And are there any things that Greg Stafford had in store that you want to put in the games? Some notes. Yes, I know. It's a Pandora box. My question. Est-ce que justement, avec le décès de Greg Stafford, Chaosium souhaite mettre ce que Greg a pu écrire, ce que Greg Stafford avait en note dans les nouvelles productions?
Well, I would have to say, actually, a big part of my day job is taking projects for RuneQuest that Greg put much of it together but never quite finished it, and bringing these to life. So right now the three big projects I'm working on. Jason Dural is the line editor overall for RuneQuest and is responsible for most of the books. And then I have a number of special projects that are basically finishing things that Greg put into motion. One is the forthcoming Cults book that we're hoping to have done by the end of the year. And that's it's like Cults of Prax and Cults of Terror on steroids. It's 100 cults. But it's the big one is the RuneQuest campaign. And this was Greg's personal house campaign that goes from the conquest of Sartar by the Lunars to the end of the world.
Oh, at last.
Yes, that's a big project that I'm working on right now.
Alors évidemment, c'est une grande partie de son travail, c'est de remettre de l'ordre et remettre en forme tout ce qu'a pu écrire Greg Stafford. Donc il y a d'abord le livre des cultes, enfin le livre des religions. Donc il va y avoir une centaine de cultes, comme il dit, sur stéroïdes. Et puis surtout la campagne massive qui va de l'invasion des Lunars jusqu'à rien que ça, la fin du monde. So after the end of the world, we know there won't be any sequels.
No, my plan is not to, just like with King Arthur Pendragon. After you've done the Grand Pendragon campaign, there's no point in playing out the 6th century. But the other big project that I'm having that I'm very, very happy that we're going to finally get wrapped up is HeroQuest. Now, not the rule system HeroQuest, but HeroQuesting in Runequest. And this was a project that Greg was obsessed with since the 70s. And we've worked out the mechanics about how the rewards from participating in mythic journeys, and we've realized that's actually not the problem. The problem is how do we give a set of tools to game masters and players to be able to create mythic journeys without having to know a lot about mythology. And so I've been working with Chris Klug, who did he did Dragon Quest and James Bond 007, some minor games.
Blast from the past.
And he and I have been working with Jason on how do we create a set of tools for the GM to be able to narrate these mythological feeling adventures without having to get a degree in gloranthology beforehaunt. And it's very, very fun and very exciting.
Alors la glorantologie, néologisme superbement trouvé. Donc l'autre projet c'est évidemment HeroQuest. Alors HeroQuest c'est une version qui est, et on ne parle pas là du système, c'est une version qui est plus, on va dire, héroïque sur vraiment le héros et ce que cela va amener. Mais évidemment le problème c'est qu'il y a toute la mythologie Gloranta et elle n'est pas petite à assimiler. Et donc justement ils sont en train de travailler sur un système où on peut jouer des héros, un système où on va pouvoir sentir ce vent mythologique, ce souffle mythologique et mythique, sans justement avoir ce fameux diplôme en connaissance de Gloranta. So, and my last question will be about, actually, two. Pendragon, you mentioned Pendragon. And you mentioned that we mentioned the end of a game, actually, the great campaign of Pendragon, or the great campaign concerning Runequest. What do you have in store for Pendragon, and how can you produce things when we know that basically the game has been covered? Pour Pendragon, on a la grande campagne de l'Enfant Roi et les autres qui couvre en fait tout le jeu, tout comme la grande campagne de Runequest pourra le faire. Comment est-ce qu'on peut créer autre chose, et notamment pour Pendragon?
Well, Pendragon was in not just my opinion, but Greg's opinion, that was his masterpiece of game design. And so at one level, it is simply very, very important to us that we're able to produce Greg's final vision for what Pendragon should be. But I also think that Pendragon never really, other than the very first edition, it never really got the treatment that it deserves. It didn't get, its books, you buy the original, or you buy the GPC, the Great Pendragon Campaign, and you're buying a 500-page, almost a skeletal outline of a book.
Yes.
And when we re-release, our big plans on Pendragon is to release the definitive Greg version of it, and release it around a new treatment and an expanded treatment of the Grand Pendragon campaign itself, and have that broken into sections.
Yeah. Alors là, une grande nouvelle, c'est qu'effectivement, ils estimaient que Pendragon n'avait jamais eu le traitement que Greg voulait donner ou méritait, et que, par exemple, on prend la grande campagne de Pendragon qui couvre tout le jeu, c'est effectivement une sorte de squelette, c'est-à-dire on vous donne des petits conseils et puis on va année après année. Et donc là, ça serait ressortir la version ultime, celle que Greg Stafford avait en tête, avec justement cette campagne qui serait beaucoup plus étoffée, qui fait déjà quand même 500 pages. Alors on imagine, and it's already 500 pages. It's going to be huge.
Redone in a treatment where you don't have to buy a 500-page.
Et ça sera donc refait justement pour pas que ça fasse 500 pages. Tout le monde sera content pour son.
I can't give out too many details on this because we will be making a formal official announcement later this year on it. But we believe that Pendragon is as great a game as Call of Cthulhu and as Runequest, and it needs to have the treatment towards new players and a new audience to make it something that, as a new player, you can experience why this is considered by many game designers to be the pinnacle of RPG game design.
Et donc justement, and you mentioned the pinnacle. This is why we have pieces of Pendragon in Runequest with the passion system. Donc il considère que c'est vraiment le grand œuvre de Greg Stafford et que justement on veut vraiment lui donner cet écrin magnifique. Il y aura une annonce officielle qui va être faite, mais vous voyez ici à Rollist TV, eh bien on peut vous le dire un petit peu en avant. So
and actually, if you don't mind me jumping in for a moment, going back to your very first question, one of the things in common with all three of these games, Cthulhu, Runequest, Pendragon, is that ultimately these are games about your character. Your character's own psychology, your character's own conflicts of interest. You as the player are playing what is the center of the game. And I think that's a big part of the reason for the resurgence and interest in Chaosium.
Et c'est justement une des clés de ces trois grands jeux, c'est que tout est basé, tout est fondé sur le personnage. And I don't know if it's the same in the US, but in France, when players tend to play Pendragon, they tend to use a very nice level of language. Yes, oh sir, all that. So my last question will be with another product. Ma dernière question sera avec un nouveau produit, Rivières of Londres. So Rivières of Londres is a game. A series of books which are not very famous in France. Can you tell us more about them and about the game, of course? Donc, les Rivières de Londres, disponible aux éditions Nouveau Millénaire. C'est le dernier apprenti magicien. On vous mettra les précisions. Va être l'adaptation la prochaine adaptation de Chaosium. Donc, pour que Jeff nous en dise un petit peu plus.
So the Rivers of London book it's a series of novels by Ben Aronovich, which it takes place in basically the demimonde of London, the mythology that lies underneath the modern city of London. And like with Call of Cthulhu or other esoteric adventures, you as the character, you discover the existence of this vast demimonde of nature spirits.
Another day at the office for the players.
Oh, exactly, another one. And it's a series that I absolutely love and am a fan of it. And there were a lot of elements in there that I thought, this is very similar to elements in Glorantha. And then as I kept reading this, references to Call of Cthulhu, the role-playing game, started show up in the book. And Lynn Hardy was in contact with Ben Aronovich and reached out to him and asked, would you be interested in there being a role-playing game treatment? And Ben was beyond ecstatic and excited about it. Turns out he's a gigantic Chaosium fan. And this was a dream of his to have a Chaosium role-playing game treatment of his series. And this is one that I'm very excited about.
Donc c'est la série de Ben Aronovich qui est donc disponible, comme je vous le disais, aux éditions Nouveau Millénaire, et c'est sur un Londres un petit peu ésotérique. C'est le Londres caché, ce qu'on retrouve très très souvent dans pas mal de bouquins de fantasy urbaine anglais, Neil Gaiman, Neverwhere par exemple. Et en fait, les joueurs vont découvrir ce monde caché avec tout ce qui va en découdre et en découler. Et ce qui va se passer surtout, c'est que, ce qui s'est passé, c'est que Lynn Hardy de Chaosium a contacté l'auteur et qui a dit, écoutez, on aimerait bien en faire un jeu de rôle parce qu'il y a plein de points communs avec nos jeux. Et c'était un grand fan de Chaosium, who isn't. Et ce qui s'est passé, eh bien, c'est que le reste, comme on dit en anglais, c'est de l'histoire. C'est ainsi que ça s'est créé. Le jeu a été lancé et donc on l'attend avec impatience parce qu'évidemment, ça va être un univers qui va être donné et comme c'est un jeu de rôle, il va y avoir encore plus d'éléments par rapport au livre. Well, it's been a pleasure having you, Jeff. A real pleasure for me and Rollist TV and for me as a long-time fan. We just wish you for the best. And this will be my last question. What can we wish for Chaosium for the years to come? Qu'est-ce qu'on peut souhaiter à Chaosium en conclusion pour les années à venir?
Well, that we continue churning out great adventures, great campaigns, and we keep to Greg's artistic vision of games being something that are both fun, but also something of personal value to each of us.
Nice closing words. Donc la seule chose qu'on peut souhaiter à Chaosium, c'est toujours de produire de si belles choses qui sont dans ce que voulait que Greg Stafford produise, à savoir quelque chose qui est certes fait pour être un aspect ludique, mais aussi qui amène quelque chose de bien plus profond en nous. Thanks again. It was a pleasure. À très bientôt les amis.
Au revoir.